We're joined now, though, by Sky News host Amanda Stoker. Really good to talk to you again. I was speaking with Senator Pauline Hanson a little while ago, Amanda, about this whole issue of the Pharmacy Guild versus the AMA, the fact that the Labor Party in the budget allowed people to have their prescriptions at 30-day prescriptions extended out to 60. Pharmacy Guild's gone crazy, says it's going to shut down hundreds of chemist shops right across the country. You would have been in the middle of lobbying from the Pharmacy Guild and the AMA in your days in Parliament. What do you make of what's going on here?
This represents a really ugly turf war between the doctors and the pharmacists in many ways. But what's been missed by the Albanese government here, in my view, is the really important role that pharmacists play in providing substantial healthcare and advice in the places where the shortage of doctors bites hard. And so the small pharmacies in the remote towns all through the bush are absolutely vital to people being able to get any kind of medical care. It's usually the only option. And they become much less viable as a consequence. And that often takes the last kind of reliable medical advice out of these communities. I'm really troubled by this proposal. I'm not as worked up about the concept of the medicine shortages because I think those will be worked through over time. But the consequence of the medicine shortage issue needing to be dealt with is that the taxpayer is going to end up having to pay more for medicines. The reason we face shortages in this country is because actually, as a country, we pay very little for medicines compared to other places in the world. Long term, this is a dud for the taxpayer and it's a dud for people who need healthcare.
What surprises me about it, Amanda, is it got to this point. I mean, as you know, the Pharmacy Guild are probably one of the, if not the most vocal lobbyists in Canberra. They are very good at lobbying and arguing their case. But we've got to the point here now where the new Albanese government is faced in any by-election they have or in any upcoming federal election, that they could have every small pharmacist around the country putting notes up in their pharmacy saying, don't bring back the Labor government because it's going to cost you more for your medicine.
Is that any different to the way that the unions put up anti-coalition stuff in the office staff room? Is it any different to the way they put up signs in public hospitals or, I give a Gonski signs up outside the public school? I mean, I think this stuff represents a degree of engagement from people who've got an interest in what governments do. You can't complain about it when it's the pharmacists and be okay with it when it's other parts of the community. I think it's also worth observing that the doctors do it just as well. And so the magic here is in finding the shared interests that pharmacists and doctors have and bringing them on the same page, because those things do exist. The failing here is that Butler and Albanese haven't done that work. They haven't brought the right heads around the table. They haven't negotiated. Instead, they've taken the speaking notes from the doctors and forced it on everyone else instead of doing the job of a responsible and measured government, and that is going, well, what are all of the considerations that have got to go into this policy? They haven't done that.
Imagine if, shock upon shock, the government said, oh, we might have to have another look at this. We might have got it wrong. We might pause this and go back and talk to all of the parties involved and see if we can't come up with a resolution. Who would have thought that that might be a way to run the country?
And look, I genuinely believe that there is strength in saying, okay, I hear you. Maybe we didn't calibrate this quite right. Let's come together and see if there is that space in the Venn diagram where everyone can get what they need to deliver for our community and to be viable. That's good for everybody long term. I think there's strength in doing that, but there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of appetite from Butler at this point in time. He seems more interested in helping the doctors get payback for, policy wins in other spheres. And quite frankly, that petty approach is beneath the medical profession, and it betrays Australians.
The other idea coming out of Canberra that really worries me, and I know it'll worry you, the idea that we can strangle free speech on digital platforms by some definition of what might or might not be disinformation. They're talking about fines over $6.88 million. There's a disinformation and misinformation draft framework that's been now set up by Labor. Jim Chalmers is taking credit for the budget surplus as well. We'll get on to him in a moment. But how do we define who's this magician who says, well, that's disinformation, that's not?
Well, the nature of this proposed legislation is that bureaucrats, largely operating out of Canberra, will decide whether your particular social media post constitutes either misinformation, that is unintentionally wrong, to simplify it, or disinformation, information that is deliberately wrong. And if they are of the view that it falls within that remit, they would have the opportunity to pull a lever that can inflict enormous fines, 5% of global turnover, or millions of dollars, whichever is the higher. I mean, these are huge numbers for a social media company like a Facebook or a TikTok or a or an Instagram type operation. And what that's going to drive is much less bravery in the free speech space when it comes to the online world. And let's be real here. We already have the big tech companies doing things like censoring by sort of greying out or taking down posts that say controversial propositions like, wait for it, you can only be born a woman and stay a woman. You can't be born a man and become a woman. Things like that are being taken down now, and that's without a code of practice like this in place. If you put the long arm of government into this space as well, and then back it with enormous penalties, the chilling effect on speech is going to be extraordinary. And for this to be dressed up in the language of keeping us safe online, and that's the way the government have pitched it, is ugly and offensive. You know, they're not prepared to act, for instance, to deal with the absolute torrent of disgusting pornography that children are exposed to way too young and often inadvertently online, but they are prepared to take draconian measures to stop people saying things they disagree with online. This should trouble every Australian.
Yeah, and it needs a huge debate, and you wouldn't think any sensible parliament is ever going to pass that. I note you talking to me tonight, Amanda, from your home base in Brisbane. We learned today from Radio 4BC that Anastasia Palaszczuk may change the name of where you are now to Mianjin in time for the Brisbane Olympic Games in 2032. What do you think of that?
Oh, well, no one will know where we are. There's very little to be achieved by doing this, I think. We should all respect and treat as our equals the people in this country who have Indigenous roots. But that doesn't mean we need to rewrite history. It doesn't mean we need to change the name of everything. And it doesn't mean we need to carry a black armband about everything in our past. This should be about walking forward together, doing practical things on the ground that make a difference for people whose lives aren't as good as they should be. And we need to really lay off the virtue signalling that helps no one.
100%. Well said. Great to catch up, Amanda. Talk to you soon.